fun and refreshingly satisfying. K-dramas carry warmth and move people's hearts. Meet the fascinating stories of Korea through K-dramas.
In our headlines on this Tuesday, December 31st, here in South Korea, 174 out of the 179 victims of Sunday's passenger plane crash have been identified thus far, as many ordinary people make their way to memorial centers set up in Muan and here in Seoul. And pundits are questioning the presence of the concrete wall at the end of the runway at Muan International Airport that the Jeju Air plane crashed into before bursting into flames and killing all but 2 of the 181 people on board. Meanwhile, an arrest warrant has been issued for President Yoon Suk-yeol in response to his silent snubbing of a series of summons served to him in recent days by investigators for questioning over charges of insurrection in light of his brief imposition of martial law on December 3rd. We start with the latest developments with regard to Korea's worst air disaster in decades. Most of the victims of the plane crash have been identified, but the task of recovering their remains continues. Our Park Gun-woo has the latest.
The identification of at least 174 out of the 179 victims has been confirmed as of Tuesday afternoon, while efforts to recover the personal belongings and body parts of some victims are ongoing. DNA analysis is underway to help identify the remaining victims. The first funeral home for one of the victims has been set up in Gwangju, while most of the other victims' bodies are still undergoing related procedures before being returned to their families. Acting President Choi Sang-mok said maximum support will be provided for funerals in accordance with the wishes of the bereaved families. Mourners across all age groups have been heading to joint memorial altars from the early morning to mourn the 179 lives lost. Muan has at least 2 memorial altars, including one at the Muan Sports Complex and a newly established one set up on Tuesday at the airport, following requests from bereaved family members. Here's what some of the mourners in Muan had to say.
I couldn't sleep at all yesterday because I was so sad. That's why I came here from the very early morning. I canceled all my year-end and New Year's gatherings to welcome the new year calmly.
We were so heartbroken. My daughter even came from New Zealand.
One priest also visited the site.
My heart aches so much when I think of the bereaved families, so I came here with my fellow believers. Right now, I think the most important thing is to simply be together and cry together.
Along with joint memorial altars in Muan, just like the one I'm standing now, at least 88 memorial altars have been established across the country. Those include the ones in Gwangju City, where the majority of the passengers who lost their lives in the plane crash were from, as well as in Seoul. The memorial altars will be open until Saturday, the last day of the national mourning period. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News, Muan.
The Jeju Air passenger plane burst into flames after crashing into a concrete wall at the end of the runway at Muan International Airport. Pundits are now questioning the presence and the purpose of this solid structure. Our Choi Min-jung reports.
Last Sunday, a Jeju airplane crashed into a concrete wall after skidding off the runway at Muan International Airport during a forced landing. Aviation experts are questioning the significance of the wall located off the runway in what was South Korea's worst plane crash in history. Experts suggest that the high number of fatalities was likely due to the plane hitting the wall.
The passengers were killed by hitting a solid structure just over the end of the runway, where a solid structure should not be.
The concrete structure holds localizers, which are antennas that help navigate airplane landings. The Transport Ministry explained that there are no standardized designs or regulations for installing such facilities.
The type of foundation used for the localizers varies depending on the airport. For example, some use concrete structures while others use pile-type foundations.
The official added that airports in Gimpo, Daegu, Yeosu, Jeju, Gyeongju, and Pohang also have localizers placed on top of concrete structures. The ministry also implied that the use of concrete was not problematic, as similar practices are observed abroad, including in Los Angeles in the U.S., as well as in Spain and South Africa. Yet, the government said it would thoroughly investigate if there are any correlations.
We are currently reviewing the relevant regulations and international practices, and we plan to conduct a thorough investigation to determine if there is any correlation with the accident.
The findings from the investigation will not only be crucial to uncovering what caused the crash and the high number of fatalities, but also for the safety of passengers and crew members at other airports. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Now, questions are also being raised about whether Jeju Air had placed priority on profits rather than safety in the operation of its flights. Our Lee Seung-jae explains.
Following the Jeju Air passenger plane crash that killed 179 people on Sunday, questions have been raised about whether the low-cost carrier has been overly focused on profitability by focusing their planes in service longer than their competitors. According to the Financial Supervisory Service on Monday, Jeju Air's average monthly passenger flight operation time per aircraft in the third quarter of this year stood at 418 hours, the longest among the 6 domestic airlines. The figure surpasses full-service carriers, including Korean Air, at 355 hours, Asiana Airlines at 335 hours, while other low-cost carriers Jin Air, T-Way Air, and Air Busan all recorded less than 400 hours. The very plane that was involved in the tragic accident was also found to have operated 13 flights in the 48 hours before the incident. While it traveled from Muan, Jeju Island, and Incheon, and international destinations during that 48-hour period, the plane typically served as a charter flight for group tours organized by a Gwangju-based travel agency. The recent holiday season traveling may have also increased the flight operations of the passenger plane. The concerns over Jeju Air's passenger planes have also led to a surge in cancellations. According to industry sources, as of Monday at 1 p.m., 68,000 Jeju Air flight reservations have been canceled. Of them, 33,000 were domestic flights, while 34,000 were for international routes. Jeju Air said most of the cancellations came shortly after the deadly crash on Sunday. Domestic travel agencies have also reported a surge in cancellations of tour packages. While the travel industry is closely monitoring the current situation, it expects demands for travel to continue declining as public anxiety lingers. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
An arrest warrant has been issued for President Yoon Suk-yeol in response to a silent snubbing of a series of summons served to him in recent days for questioning over charges of insurrection. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
An arrest warrant has been issued on Tuesday for President Yoon Suk-yeol by a Seoul local court. This means for the first time ever, a sitting president can be taken into custody by law enforcement authorities. When the actual detaining will take place is typically not revealed, but the warrant is valid for 7 days until next Monday. According to a CIO official, Yoon, once detained, may be held at the Seoul Detention Center in Uwang, just south of Seoul. On top of this, search warrants have been issued as well, and locations include anywhere that President Yoon could have been. This comes as on Monday at midnight, the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials requested an arrest warrant after 3 failed tries to summon President Yoon for questioning. On the request, 2 allegations against President Yoon were stated. One for leading an insurrection and the other for abusing authority to obstruct someone from exercising their rights. On the other hand, President Yoon's legal representatives has stated that the CIO had no authority over investigating insurrection charges, so the requests were not valid. But now, with the court's decision to issue the arrest warrant, it appears that these 2 issues are settled. There is probable cause for the 2 charges, and the CIO has the authority to investigate President Yoon for insurrection charges. However, President Yoon's legal representatives said the court issuing an arrest warrant is in fact illegal and invalid.
The issuance of the warrant does not resolve everything. It was requested by an institution that clearly lacks legal authority, and the process of requesting the warrant was not transparent.
The attorney added that Yoon's legal representatives will dispute this decision at the Constitutional Court. In the meantime, the Presidential Security Service is now under heavy pressure as to how the detention process will go. For the time being, the service said that the security measures related to the execution of the warrant will be carried out in accordance with due legal procedures. There has been an issue as there could be a clash between law enforcement and Yoon Security Service. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The Constitutional Court has urged for prompt appointments of new justices to fill its 3 vacancies. Now, speaking at a regular briefing earlier on this Tuesday afternoon, Deputy Press Officer Chun Jae-hyun revealed that the current 6 members of the court are striving to handle a heavy workload amid a surge in the number of impeachment cases. The court also underscored the priority being placed on the impeachment trial of President Yoon Suk-yeol, who has spoken of filing an injunction. The court, however, says it has yet to receive such a request. And at the National Assembly, lawmakers across the aisle are responding to news of the arrest warrant issued against President Yoon Suk-yeol. For more on this, I have our political correspondent Lee Shi-hu live on the line. Shi-hu, let's start with the response from the ruling and opposition parties.
Yes, Sunny, as expected, they are worlds apart on the issue of the arrest warrant. The ruling People Power Party showed strong regret, calling it an inappropriate investigation method. Its floor leader Kwon Sung-dong said it's right to negotiate the schedule with the president instead of using an emergency measure to attempt Yoon's detainment. He added it would have been better for the investigative body to use more discretion, as there is no risk of Yoon trying to destroy evidence. This was countered by the main opposition Democratic Party, whose spokesperson said that the issue of the warrant provides a new and major opportunity to put an end to the insurrection and those involved in the insurrection. Spokesperson Cho Seung-rae urged Yoon to stop defending himself with the guards of the presidential office and comply with the arrest warrant.
Shiu, I also hear a parliamentary probe has been put on track into charges of insurrection against the president.
Indeed, Sunny, the Assembly agreed to launch a parliamentary investigation allegedly against President Yoon and his administration for instigating insurrection through Yoon's declaration of emergency martial law on December 3rd. 191 of 285 lawmakers present at this afternoon's plenary session voted to approve the bill for launch proposed by the National Assembly Speaker Muan. 71 voted against the bill, while 23 abstained. Now, this means the National Assembly's bipartisan special committee to investigate the Yoon's administration's alleged insurrection charges will officially begin its activities. The committee this morning held its first meeting and selected its chair and secretaries from both the rival parties to lead the 45-day investigation process until February 13th, during which the lawmakers will summon witnesses and those involved for questioning. They're mainly looking to question Yoon's close aides, including the officials at the presidential office, the Office of the National Security, and the Office for Government Policy Coordination, as well as military officials at the Defense Ministry and the Defense Counterintelligence Command. But despite the committee being bipartisan, there are differences in stance between its ruling and opposition party members on the details of the investigation process, including its scope and depth and the list of witnesses to summon.
Right, well, despite their bickering on that front, Shiu, I hear in a rare show of solidarity, the two political parties have indeed come together to pray for the victims of Sunday's deadly plane crash.
That is correct. The rival parties showed united support and condolences for the victims of the recent disaster. They've set up a memorial altar together at the parliament and held a moment's silence. The ruling People Power Party's Emergency Leadership Committee Chair Kwon Young-se and the main opposition Democratic Party of Korea Chairman Lee Jae-myung held closed-door talks presided over by Speaker Oh today. The party spokespeople announced after that they've agreed to form a bipartisan consultative body focused on addressing topics related to people's livelihoods and also discuss response measures to the recent plane crash in Muan. The ruling and opposition lawmakers will form a committee to respond to the disaster and meet with the grieving family members to come up with necessary support measures. They will also carry out discussions with the government in the process.
All right, Chiu, thank you for that coverage. That was our political correspondent, Lee Shi-hu, with the latest from the National Assembly. Now, with regard to the vacancies at the Constitutional Court, Acting President Choi Sang-mok has approved the appointment of 2 Constitutional Court justices to fill 2 of the 3 vacancies on the panel. This came at a cabinet meeting on this Tuesday afternoon as the Constitutional Court undertakes the impeachment trial of President Yoon Suk-yeol. Now, 2 of the justices agreed on by both the ruling and opposition parties have been approved by Che. Meanwhile, on the 2 special probe bills against the President and the First Lady, Che has raised constitutional concerns and requested bipartisan negotiation. And in other news, consumer prices here in Korea marked an annual acceleration of 2.3% this year, the slowest in 4 years. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun covers this finding.
South Korea's annual consumer inflation slowed to the mid-2% range this year, marking a more subdued pace compared to 2023. Data from Statistics Korea on Tuesday showed that the Consumer Price Index, a measure of inflation, rose by 2.3% year-on-year. This falls in line with the Bank of Korea's forecast in November and is the lowest rate since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, as inflation climbed to 2.5% in 2021 and peaked at 5.1% in 2022 before settling at 3.6% last year.
The drop in petroleum prices was smaller due to the impact of international oil prices, while agricultural product prices went up more. But the growth in personal services, electricity, gas, water, and processed food slowed down, resulting in a 1.3 percentage point drop compared to last year.
Figures for December show that the CPI rose 1.9% year-on-year, marking the 4th consecutive month of inflation under the 2% mark. The increase was, however, slightly larger than in November, signaling a potential shift back to the 2% range due to factors such as high exchange rates, which led to a reversal in the downward course of energy prices that had been seen throughout the year. Inflation remained above the Bank of Korea's target of 2% in 2024, primarily due to steep prices of fresh produce. The cost of agricultural goods soared by more than 10% this year, which is the highest rate recorded since 2010. Prices of fruits such as tangerines and pears surged, and vegetables like cabbages were reflected in an increase of almost 10% in the fresh food index. Fresh fruit prices alone rose by more than 17%, marking the sharpest rise in 20 years. The country's agriculture ministry attributed the rise to unstable conditions for growing agricultural goods due to climate change. During a review of price trends on the same day, the Bank of Korea noted increased uncertainty surrounding inflation forecasts, citing factors such as exchange rate fluctuations and weakened consumer demand. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, on the foreign exchange market, the average exchange rate for the 4th quarter of 2024 stands at the highest since the 1st quarter of 2009 during the global financial crisis. According to the Bank of Korea, the average won to US dollar exchange rate based on the daily closing price stood at 1,398.75 won against the greenback. Now, this is the highest in almost 16 years. The South Korean currency has been losing more ground against major currencies in recent days, ahead of the return of the Trump administration in the US and political uncertainty here at home. Korea is ushering in the Year of the Snake in 2025. Our Yoon tells us what this means and more. To take a listen.
As we step into 2025, South Korea is embracing the energy of a new lunar year, one that carries the mystique of the blue snake. But as the calendar turns, it's not just the animals of the zodiac that are shifting. It's also the hopes and dreams of the people. From bold aspirations to heartfelt wishes, let's take a look at what people here in South Korea are wishing for in this year of transformation.
I haven't been here for 10 years, so I'm just getting back. So it makes me want to come to Korea more.
My New Year's wish is to eat a lot of tteokbokki. Wow.
Okay.
This year felt really boring, but by the end, I met a beautiful girlfriend. I hope we stay happy together for a long time.
I have 2 sons, and my New Year's wish is for them to live a healthy and happy life.
The year 2025 is represented by the snake. Each year is represented by one of the 12 animals of the zodiac, meaning those born in the year of the snake, 12 years apart, share the same zodiac sign. For many, wishes and aspirations for the coming year are similar.
Next year, I'll be 73 and born in the year of the snake. I don't have any special wishes. Just staying healthy is all I hope for.
Over a 60-year cycle, each zodiac animal appears 5 times, each time with a different color. With 2025 marking the year of the blue snake, the National Folk Museum of Korea is holding a special exhibition that explores the symbolism and ancient customs surrounding the snake, an animal seen as both a symbol of wisdom and a sacred yet fearsome force. Ancient artifacts and tools adorned with snake shapes or patterns provide a glimpse into the symbolic meaning of snakes in past cultures. Often seen as a frightening creature, snakes were believed to be driven away by scented pendants filled with musk or by fire holders. In other times, snakes were used in traditional medicine and as a health tonic as promoted in old advertisements. Also, snakes were often seen as symbols of evil or punishment, like Medusa in Greek mythology, where the snakes in her hair represented a number of things, including evil, punishment, and power. This year, the museum expanded its focus to the cultural heritage of other countries, showcasing artifacts like a snake guardian deity curving from the Baga people of Guinea, along with other ritualistic items. The exhibition highlights how snakes were symbolized and used in various ancient cultures. While 2025 is the year of the snake, the fortune for every zodiac sign is bright. May the coming year bring smooth paths and fulfillment to everyone. Wishing you a wonderful and prosperous year ahead. Yoon, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. In time for the end of the year, Moscow and Kiev have conducted a major swap of prisoners of war. In a deal brokered by the United Arab Emirates, Russia and Ukraine exchanged hundreds of prisoners of war on Monday, with the Russian Defense Ministry saying 150 Russian troops returned home, while Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said a total of 189 Ukrainians had been freed. In what is the 59th prisoner exchange since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Zelensky said that the Ukrainian prisoners included military personnel, National and Border Guards, along with 2 civilians who had been captured by Russian forces in 2022. While Ukraine has not published the exact number of prisoners of war held captive by Russia, BBC sources suggest that the number from the near 3-year war is more than 8,000. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres published his annual New Year's message on Monday, expressing his concerns over global warming, which he called a climate breakdown.
Throughout 2024, hope has been hard to find. Wars are causing enormous pain, suffering, and displacement. Inequalities and divisions are rife, fueling tensions and mistrust. The top 10 hottest years on record have happened in the last 10 years, including 2024. This is climate breakdown in real time.
The UN chief added that in 2025, it is essential for countries to put the world on a safer path by cutting emissions and supporting the transition to a renewable future. As we count down towards the new year, Brazil's Rio de Janeiro is preparing for the world's largest New Year's Eve celebration. Rio's iconic Copacabana beach, which is hosting the New Year's Eve party, is expected to be attended by some 2.5 million people, including locals and visitors from around the globe. Rio authorities were seen finalizing and inspecting the main stage in the middle of the beach on Monday, while the city's firefighters inspected the rafts that will be transporting over 15 tons of fireworks for the strike of the clock at midnight on the 1st of January. Some impressive artworks went under the hammer in 2024. L'Empire de Lumière, Belgian surrealist artist René Magritte's oil painting, depicting a paradoxical combination of day and night, was sold at a Christie's auction in New York for some $121 million. Other works such as British painter David Hockney's California, which had not been seen in public for over 40 years, was sold at another Christie's auction this year for some $24 million, while Rest on the Flight into Egypt, painted by 16th century Venetian artist Titian, fetched some $22 million. While the renowned pieces of art fetched impressive prices, subversive artist Maurizio Catalan's artwork, Comedian, which is a banana duct-taped on a wall, also made headlines when it was sold for $6.24 million. Kim Xiang, Arirang News.
Although not as much as yesterday, the temperatures were higher than usual today. Since the skies are clear, there should be no inconvenience in seeing the last sunset of 2024. From dawn to morning tomorrow, light snow will fall in the inland areas and the mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province. As for the first sunrise of the new year, it will first come around on Dokdo Island at 7:26 tomorrow morning. Seoul will see its first sunrise at 7:47. If you're planning to go to see the first sunrise tomorrow morning, you should dress extra warm, as temperatures will be below 0 degrees. Seoul and Gwangju will start off at -2 degrees, Daejeon -3. Daytime temperatures will move up to 8 degrees in Seoul, Chuncheon 6 degrees. No severe cold is expected for the first week of the new year. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. Happy New Year.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Thank you for watching.
K-drama, the charm of Korea that captivates the world. Love like a K-drama. A story of us where hope and despair coexist. Fun and refreshingly satisfying. K-dramas carry warmth and move people's hearts. Meet the fascinating stories of Korea through K-dramas.
Step into a world where culture speaks beyond words, bridging hearts and minds. Hello, this is your DJ Sujung for Culture Crunch. Crunch on a new flavour of K-culture with me every day.
진짜 한국에선 어떻게 먹는지 알려줄까?
K-바비큐? 신김치랑 먹어야지.
치킨? 치맥 페스티벌은 처음이지?
김치? 종류만큼 먹는 법도 가지각색.
김밥? 시장에선, 산에선, 바다에선 이렇게.
국밥?
취향 따라, 입맛 따라. 이런 한국, 와보지 않고는 모를걸?
Korea is observing a period of national mourning this week as the country reels in the aftermath of its worst air disaster in decades. We have more Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Tuesday, December 31st here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. We start our panel session today with the latest on the deadly plane crash at Muan International Airport before touching upon some of these stories here that made international headlines this year. For more on this, I have Andres Sanchez-Brown with EFE Spain live on the line. Andres, it's good to have you on.
Hello, Sung-hee. It's great to have you here. Great to be here.
Right. I also have writer Colin Marshall with us. Colin, it's great to have you on.
Hello, Sonia. Thank you for having me.
Right. Andres, let's begin on a rather sober note. Let's start with the latest developments with regard to the tragic plane crash in Muan Airport and the government's latest response.
Yes, well, the government has pledged strong support for the families of the victims. We've seen interim President Choi Sang-mok visit Muan twice already. We saw him lay some flowers in the memorial altar that was set for the victims yesterday. But I think most importantly, the government has basically activated a so-called emergency inspection of the six Korean airlines that operate the Boeing 737-800, which is the model that crashed in Muan on Sunday. Now, all of these 6 companies are basically 5 Korean low-cost carriers and Korean Air, a company that operates only 2 737s. And of course, there's a strong focus on Jeju Air, and there's a strong focus on Jeju Air's landing gears on these planes, on these 737s, because as we could see in the footage of the emergency landing of the accident on Sunday, the plane, for whatever reason, wasn't able to deploy the landing gear. And then we also know now that on Monday, the day after the accident, another 737 belonging to Jeju Air actually had to return to Gimpo Airport after the pilot detected some problem with the landing gear. And even though in the end he was able to deploy it without any problems, just out of pure security concerns, he decided to go back to the airport. There's also focus on how Jeju Air operates and how much time it dedicates to maintaining and checking security on its airplanes, because Jeju Air is among the low-cost carriers, the one that basically puts more, we could call it operational stress on its planes. This means that its planes are the ones that spend most time in the air, which means that there's less time to check for maintenance while on the ground. So of course there's questions being raised about, are companies like Jeju Air putting operational efficiency, or in this case profit, ahead of maintenance? Because we know now that the plane that crashed on Sunday did 13 trips on the 48 hours prior to the accident to 4 different countries. So it's always good, I believe, to screen this kind of things. It's never a bad moment to check how airlines are operating. Of course, the government is also trying to screen airports in the country regarding this structure against which the plane on Sunday crashed, the concrete structure that held the localizing antenna, because there's some other airports with similar structures in Korea. And of course, this is useful not only in Korea, but to other countries as well. Actually, Spain does have airports with similar layouts. So as I say, it's good that authorities try to screen on air travel security, of course.
Right. We seem to be having a slight audio problem with you, Andres. You were on and off a bit there. Colin, in the meantime, there is also quite a bit of question about the cause of this deadly crash. Now, bird strike has been suggested as one possible cause behind this crash. What have you been hearing, Colin?
Well, the first thing I did on Sunday morning when I heard the news, when word got to me, was to look up aviation enthusiast forums on the internet. And the participants there, some of whom are pilots or aircraft mechanics themselves, were all in agreement that it didn't add up. What they were hearing, what was reported, didn't quite make sense to explain a crash of this kind, a catastrophic event of this kind. Engine trouble made sense. That is consistent with a bird strike or an intake of a bird through the engine, which is a fairly common event when taking off or landing. But the plane landed with neither its landing gear down nor its flaps out, as Andres alluded to, suggesting the failure of the hydraulic system as well as the engines. And the pilot did report a bird strike, although it's difficult to come up with an explanation in which an event like that accounts for both engine and hydraulic system failure. Freak accidents, though, are not unheard of. In the US, where I'm from, there was a famous crash landing in 1989 in Sioux City when a plane lost all of its hydraulic systems because a piece of shrapnel from a rotor blade on the engine happened to pass through the one point where they all crossed each other and it severed them all, and that's a whole other story. But these highly improbable incidents do sometimes occur. But the landing gear, yes, in this case of this crash, is what troubles everyone who examines the evidence. since, though it's primarily controlled by the hydraulic system, you don't need to use it to deploy it in an emergency, which this certainly was. You can just release it with gravity, and it goes down pretty much by itself. Now, anyone who's driven a modern car knows that when you get too close to a wall or to another car, you hear beeping. The car lets you know you're too close. You might crash. And a jetliner does much the same thing when it gets too close to the ground without the landing gear down. And as I understand it, a pilot cannot ignore that. So this suggests the situation in the cabin must have been severely compromised. I've heard reports of smoke and fire, something that made the pilot, who was very experienced, must have made him think he had no time to do any of these extras, how to just get the plane down. This particular aircraft, incidentally, reported an emergency of some kind in flight, a non-catastrophic emergency, obviously, a few days before the crash. The model of the plane, the 737-800, it has a strong safety record in and of itself. And in fact, so does Jeju Air itself, which, though having been in operation nearly 20 years now, I think it's the first time it's had an incident resulting in injury. So there's no obvious go-to factor to pin this down on at the moment. A great many things have to go wrong to bring a 737 down. And in this case, all of those factors have yet to be determined.
Right, indeed. Well, the black boxes have been recovered, and investigators are hoping that will provide some insight into the cause behind this deadly crash. But Andres, in the meantime, for the sake of greater perspective, what can you tell us about how common bird strikes are for flights, generally speaking?
Well, bird strikes are very, very, very common. I mean, checking on records, for example, there's data pointing to, for example, countries like the UK reporting around 1,400 bird strikes in a single year. I've seen data actually that says that in Korea in the last around 5 years, there's been at least 650 incidents of bird strikes. But as you can see, none of the outcomes were terrible accidents. Of course, there's been instances back in the day in different countries where, for example, let's say a flock of geese hits an engine, or an engine sucks a pigeon, and of course sometimes it could cause a accident. But 99% of the time, that is not the case. And I think, as Colin was pointing very well, all we know is, so far, all we know is that the control tower in Muan did emit an alert for aviary risk, which just is telling the pilot that there's bird activity close to or among the trajectory of the airplane. And the next thing we know is that the pilot did send out a mayday signal around 2 minutes later. We can assume that, yes, maybe there was a bird strike. It looks quite possible. We've also heard reports of the cabin crew, the two survivors, one of them talking about apparently seeing smoke and flames on one of the engines, and also apparently some passengers have texted people on the ground saying, well, the crew has told us that we hit a bird, apparently. Once again, we don't know. And of course, we're really at this point, we can't really establish if it was a single bird strike, of course, that caused the whole accident to happen. What we do know is, what we saw in the footage is that the pilot, for whatever reason, attempts an emergency landing, and he attempts it very fast after emitting the mayday alert. And he lands without the landing gear having been deployed, and other mechanisms that help the plane brake, like, for example, the spoilers, which are these flaps on top of the wings that open up when you're landing. Those can't be seen being activated during landing. We can't see also the so-called reverse thrust of the engines. All those mechanisms make the plane lose speed, and for whatever reason, they weren't activated. So could it have been an hydraulic failure? Are we talking about a failure in the electronic systems? We really don't know. And of course, authorities have already told us it's going to take months to determine what really happened, and it might be many factors playing into this accident, into this terrible accident.
Right, indeed. And as we wait for some answers, Colin, the government has declared this week a period of national mourning, which is why quite a number of events, including end-of-year festivities, have been cancelled. Right, Colin?
That's right. Actually, I have an American friend at the Bank of Korea. He works at the Bank of Korea, who just this morning sent me a picture of his black mourning ribbon, and these were distributed to every employee at the Bank of Korea. They're all expected to wear them. This is a culture we don't really see in the United States. But yes, I've lost count of how many cancellation notices of New Year's festivities I've seen. But it's not just New Year's festivities. A fair few regular television broadcasts, I've seen announcements for cancellation as well, including, for example, a comedy show I watch every week. It makes me think back sort of 20 plus years now to 9/11 in the United States, where I'm from. And at the time, I remember on that day, there was a lot of reshuffling of the TV and film schedules. If any program or any film was too sort of thematically close to the event. I remember that very night I was planning on watching the film Independence Day on television, which is a movie, some may recall, where space aliens invade and go around blowing up various national monuments. And I'm sure that was deemed not quite right for 9/11, as it was not then yet called. And so that was quietly replaced with a different drama. But here in Korea, yes, the feeling is not just that that productions or shows or films with themes too close to this should be rescheduled, but that any form of levity at all would be inappropriate in what, as you say, is now a period of national mourning. And how long it will last, I think we will have to just wait and see.
Right. Meanwhile, Andres, impeachment rallies here in the country have been covered by the foreign media, but a large-scale rally scheduled initially for today, that is New Year's Eve, has been postponed as well, I understand, in light of the tragedy. Of course, what more can you tell us, Andres?
Yes, indeed. The last thing I've heard was that the people backing this rally that supported the impeachment of President Yoon was that the organizers decided not to hold it today in order to honor the victims, to mourn the victims of the Muan Air accident. What we do know that actually did happen was that some President Yoon supporters did rally today right in front of the presidential residence in Arirang in Yongsan district. And the reason for this is because, as we know, there was an order issued today that would allow technically authorities to arrest President Yoon in order to interrogate him, given that he skipped 3 interrogation summons already. We'll see how that goes. We do know that right after the accident, the 2 main parties, political parties in Korea, sort of signaled towards a truce in terms of, stopping the impeachment cycle or cross demands. I think we could all use a bit of quietness in order to ponder this terrible accident, this terrible loss of life. It does look likely that we're going to have a bit of peace in that sense, because it's just been known that interim President Choi Sang-mok did ratify 2 justices for the Constitutional Court, which partially meets the demands of the opposition party. So we'll see how it goes.
Right, we will. And as we try to make sense of this tragedy, Colin, there are civic groups which have called on the government to provide grieving family and friends with appropriate emotional support. What are your thoughts, Colin?
Yes, of course, a good faith effort from the government wouldn't go amiss, though I'm afraid providing much solace in a case like this one may lie somewhat beyond the ken of the state per se. I think back to the protests put on by the parents of the students who died on the Sewol, the ferry that sank in 2014. And they were there in Gwanghwamun Square for years. And as I recall, the foremost of their demands was for a full investigation. They seem to have felt they never got all the answers about what happened on that boat that day. So I would say I'd imagine much depends on how definitive an explanation can be produced from this investigation, which has only just begun, although an investigation of an airline crash of this kind can take years. And from what I've heard, the flight data recorder, or black box, as they're called, was itself damaged. So that can only prolong how long it takes to get the necessary information. And everyone, not just those connected directly to the accident, but everyone in the country and even beyond, will want to know exactly why this happened, and of course what can be done to minimize the chance of similar accidents in the future.
Right. Andres, moving forward, aside from this very tragic event, another story that continued to remain in international headlines and which pundits believe will continue to do so next year as well is Korea's low birth rate. You covered this as well. Briefly speaking, Andres, could you walk us through the reasons, the repercussions, as well as the potential solutions perhaps to this dismal birth rate here in the country?
Yes, Sunny, indeed. This year, as we know, the government declared a low birth rate a national emergency because, of course, it poses threats on the fact that Korean population is bound to decrease a lot in the next few decades if this trend continues. And, of course, it puts things like the National Pension Fund at risk of bankruptcy and many other issues. And once again, the government did achieve apparently very little, despite the fact that it did invest money on the issue and things like, for example, trying to bring foreign workers to aid families to help rare young children. But once again, apparently experts point out to the fact that mostly women's concerns apparently are not being listened to and addressed, which is pretty much what you hear in other countries. Governments just not listening enough to women's concerns. Of course, there's very unique features to Korea's problem that factor into the issue of low birth rate. Things like work culture, the long working hours for which Korea is well known, or the fact that real estate prices are quite high in the country, especially in the capital area where most Koreans seek to live because of the fact that the better schools are in this area, the better hospitals, et cetera, which just drives the prices up. And for example, the cost of education is a big factor too in Korea, especially given how much Korean families spend in cram schools, in the hagwons, right? So of course, some ideas that can be floated around in this regard is maybe the government could try to invest some money and try to make other areas apart from the capital area more attractive, to try to decentralize, to deconsolidate or unconsolidate the capital area a little bit, and maybe also try to pump some public money into the hagwon industry, because that would definitely lighten the burden for many Korean families.
Right, hopefully, of course. Colin, aside from standing as the world's country, that is, with the lowest birth rate, Korea officially also secured another title this year, that is the title of a super-aged society. Colin, how worried do you suppose should Korea be?
Yes, indeed. These are two sides of the same coin, the birth rate problem and the super-aging society problem. It's not a good thing, of course, although you feel somewhat insulated from it here in Seoul, partially for reasons Andres mentioned. You know, I've seen a lot of young people, even babies around today. It doesn't feel like a low birth rate society, but if you go outside Seoul, you don't have to go far outside Seoul, you notice how quickly and how markedly the average age around you, of the population around you, rises. So, of course, one category of immigrants, and we discussed before Korea's sort of perceived a need to take in more immigrants down the line. One category will be, I assume, caretakers for the elderly, the increasingly high proportion of elderly here. But I know an American here. He doesn't live here, but he spends a lot of time in Korea. He's a writer, travels a lot. Came back from Cambodia recently, and he remarked on just how many young people are there, how many kids, and how it makes you feel like, oh, there is sort of a future, whereas in Korea, it feels to him more like there's a void waiting to swallow up the society. And I never quite thought about it in those terms, but he was pointing out that in a society like Cambodia, which is in no position to lavish money on potential parents and is not known for listening to the desires or the needs of parents or women per se, they don't have a birth rate problem. So clearly other factors are involved. But as well, everybody there, in his view, in this writer's view, has a role in sort of communally raising the children, be they young, old, or anywhere in between. And this seems to be important to underscore. If you want a balanced population, the young and old alike, they need a place in society, a functional place. And in not just Korea, but across the developed world, the US as well. That's a role in society is increasingly lacking for people on the ends of the age spectrum.
Right, like we keep saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Colin,
Indeed.
Thank you so much for your time today, and Happy New Year, Colin.
Thank you, Happy New Year.
Andres, thank you so much for your insights. Happy New Year as well.
Thank you so much, Sungi. Happy New Year to you too.
Right, well, that ends today's edition of Press Perspective. Now, Korea ushers in the Year of the Snake in 2025, and given its symbol of wisdom, may you all find the strength to pave a path forward in the new year.